Let's talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to the Chief of the North Mailbag Thursdays. I am Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North, and you know why we're here. Well, maybe you don't. We are here to answer your questions about the Chiefs that you guys were so kind to provide in last week's mailbag. And this week, we're also here to talk about Keondre Coburn. Every week, I try to talk to you about a little bit about what's going on in Chiefs Kingdom, answer some mailbag questions, maybe talk about a few things that I'm writing about. I'm currently in the process right now of writing part 2 of Patrick Mahomes being the outlier, the sole exception to all the rules when it comes to quarterback statistics. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is taking a bunch of charts that have Mahomes here and everyone else right here. It's like a Jamal Charles EPA chart. There are so many of them with Patrick Mahomes that I'm going to kind of smash them all into one place, at least the best ones, explain what they mean. And basically, it'll be uncontrovertible proof that Patrick Mahomes is breaking the NFL in a way that's not even close to what anyone else has been doing in the league for the last 5 years. So I'm excited for that. But for this week, for right now, you guys every week provide me mailbag questions down there in the comment section. And I see you guys did a great job with that last week, putting question marks in front of them so I know which ones are mailbag questions. And I try to answer them. Sometimes I'll take questions from Twitter as well. I'm not this week because I want to talk about rookie defensive tackle Keondre Coburn briefly. And frankly, time is not a lot on my side today. So we're going to get right to it. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, do all the things that you're supposed to be doing for YouTube stuff. We appreciate the support and continue to provide it because Ryan and the gang, they do a great job, and I'm here too. Let's get into our mailbag questions. Again, if you want your mailbag questions to get priority for next week, because we'll be doing the same thing, put them below, put a question mark in front of it, and that'll take priority over Twitter questions. Let's get right into it. Then let's talk about Keondre Coburn. Oh, by the way, a bunch of you made comments last week. I recorded a few days after my wisdom teeth had been taken out, and a lot of you said some really supportive things. I really appreciate that. You're good people, and who says the internet is all bad? And so, and also some of you just said really nice things. Like Winter Tennis said, "This is my favorite Chiefs show of all time." That is very, very, very generous of you. Very kind. And I appreciate all of you. Dave Heller asks, Seth, first, thanks for playing through the pain last week. # built different. And to deliver another great show. Question is, do you see the Chiefs picking up another running back after the June 1st cuts? Could you see them signing Mixon if Cincinnati releases him, payback for Orlando Brown, or Dalvin Cook if the Vikings cut him, or the Chiefs content with what they have? My guess is they're content with what they have. I don't think they're going to cut Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I think what they've got Pacheco, McKinnon, and Clyde. And I think they're very comfortable with that group, with that lineup. They also drafted a guy late. They picked up an unrestricted free agent, Prince, a guy who's got a very similar athletic profile to Pacheco, which it's important to keep in mind that athletic profile doesn't mean they're the same. You can't do an athletic profile for running angry. And Pacheco is a uniquely physical running back, although Prince is a big, strong, fast running back as well. And so I don't see them really diving into the running back market, especially with guys like Mixon or Cook that will likely have suitors elsewhere. Cook is one who would 100% interest me if he were available for very, very cheap. But he's not quite what he was, although he did still have some incredible flashes last year in Minnesota. And I've gotten a chance to watch him throughout his career. Unbelievable runner. He's like 85% of Jamal Charles. And that, for people who know me, is an incredibly high compliment in terms of run style, bounce through contact, his ability to glide. I mean, he really is one of the closer things I've seen to Charles. But I just don't see them being interested in it because I think they're pretty content with the room that they have. Grayson Neely asks, which defensive end left in the fourth wave of free agents do the Chiefs grab? Yannick Ngakoue, Frank Clark, Carlos Dunlap. Thanks for the great content every week. Hey, thanks for the great questions every week, Grayson. If I were to pick one, Ngakoue is the guy I would go with. He was the most productive last year. He's not quite the normal build for what Spags wants in terms of strength against the run. They know that Clark and Dunlap are both guys who can eat up 400 or 500 snaps and be a little bit productive, even if they're not one of the primary elements of the pass rush. And so any of those guys, I'd be fine with. I think Ngakoue would be probably the best choice as a pure pass rusher. But I think they might need guys more that can do early down stuff. And so, I mean, Dunlap or Clark, the issue with Clark is that you can't ignore the human element. And what I mean by that is, for the last multiple years, Frank Clark has been one of the highest paid players on the team. He's been treated as such. Contracts matter in the locker room. Who is the team leader, who is not. Contract does matter. That's a status thing. And the coaches and the team itself has treated him like one of the pivotal foundational players, even if his play has been more of kind of at the level of average, kind of mercenary type guy. So I would just say that going from that status as like one of the defensive leaders and that kind of stuff to more of a supporting role, I think he started that path last year, but it would be a very different thing having been cut and then coming back on a much more cheap contract. That would take a lot of humility, and that's tough to do when you've been, at the pinnacle your whole career. And so I think there's a human element there too, in terms of with Frank Clark, what he'd be willing to accept from the Chiefs versus other teams. An example of that you can find in Orlando Brown's contract. He took a pretty bargain deal to sign with the Bengals. I think had he offered to sign with the Chiefs for that, they probably would have retained him. So we'll see. I do anticipate them grabbing one more defensive end, is my guess at least. Okay. I just want to make sure this was a question. Marco Beretti asks, surely when Mahomes misses MVS this season deep, it's because for years deep equals Tyreek, and Mahomes is overshooting MVS because of the speed being less than Tyreek. No, I don't think so. You got to remember that he's throwing deep passes to other players throughout that time as well. Really, it's just the deep ball is not what Mahomes is elite at. He could be. Some of his footwork stuff catches up with him a little more there, and those are just harder throws in general to complete with consistency. He's a good deep ball thrower, but not an elite one. That's something that we could see change this year, and I do think timing was something of an issue for the two of them as well, as they figured out kind of their own patterns and cadences. But I think it's like anything else. Every player is going to have their own unique timing, and so I don't think it's necessarily a matter of Tyreek. I think it's a matter of him and MVS really getting that stuff down, and then Mahomes just making sure that he keeps his footwork clean on those deep throws, because his arm talent is so much that it doesn't affect him nearly as much as it would anyone else, but it does still occasionally affect him. GC Baba, asks defense or prosecution. Well, currently I'm a prosecutor, so I guess it's a prosecution. You call me the Marty Lurie of football. Well, that's very kind of you. Raymond Vodder asked, do we add another veteran edge rusher or wide receiver during training camp? I already addressed the edge rusher. I think that's something they do. Wide receiver would surprise me. There's just not a lot out there on the market that I think really moves the needle. It seems like they are betting on the ceiling of this group of wide receivers, which whether or not I agree with it, nobody asked me. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. Shiz Boogie says, 31 says, I'm going to try Tombstone, bro. You totally should. It's delicious. Jeffrey Voss asks, are you really buying we're going to bring back Frank? Personally, I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope it does. I already addressed that a little bit. I think it's the human element there as much as anything else. They are trying to turn over with young guys on the defensive line. Mikey Graves says, hey, Seth, no questions. Just want to tell you that you're the poop. That's right. I keep it clean here. This is family friendly. I really appreciate that, Mikey. KL368 asks, what did you see from the rookie quarterbacks in the playoffs? And what do you think of the quarterback 3 spot? Seems like a great camp battle. They using the word battle would be appropriate there. They fought hard. They were a big part of why they were able to have success against the Bengals. Great receiver group. And the Jags don't have a bad offense either. It was definitely it was huge for them performing well to be able to even get to the Super Bowl. And the Eagles put up a ton of points, but it's worth noting some of that was just on incredible throws, and one was on a busted coverage. Those things happen. Overall, they really did. They performed so well that it's hard not to be overly optimistic about that group moving into this next year. I think Watson and Williams are going to keep fighting for that 3rd spot. Watson definitely gained the upper hand last year. Williams is the more athletic of the two, but Watson was the better player last year. But Williams already last year was a well above average 4th corner. Watson was a good 3rd corner. and Trent McDuffie and Snead are both very good players. I'm really, really excited about the cornerback room. One thing that it's always worth keeping in mind is that we talk about this a lot. Development is not always linear with players. So you don't say, well, this was them year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. That's not the way it always works. So it'll be interesting to see what those guys did in the offseason to build on that success they had, because you have to. If you stay the same in the league, you get worse because the league develops and improves around you. Man, a lot of people commenting on tombstones. I like tombstone pizzas. They're delicious, mostly supportive. Some of you are just wrong. If you're going to get a cheap pizza, just at least get a Jack's. I would, but Tombstone is 20 times better. So I just don't even know what to tell you. Timothy Norat says, bright future for the Chiefs wide receivers? We have no clear wide receiver 1. So it's not necessarily a question. It's more of your opinion. Our number 1 and number 3 wide receivers went bye-bye in the offseason. Will someone step up? I think so. There are definitely some questions. Yes, I agree. I think you're probably responding more to the title, which I don't do, by the way, than to the content. Where do we find the 1,500 yards we lost in the offseason with the loss of Juju and McCole? Well, one thing to keep in mind is that McCole Hardman was injured for most of last year. So those yards already got replaced through the course of the offense. I think their idea is that it'll be replaced through Tony, Moore, and Rice. And that's kind of like what we talked about last time is the ceiling, if things play out well, is terrific. Lots of young talent there. Tony's a really talented player. Moore and Rice are both very talented as well. Well, at least physically. The floor is what's frightening, right? And I think that's what Timothy is getting at, is this idea that you have guys like a Juju Smith-Schuster who is an above average wide receiver, not a great one, but he's a solid player, kind of similar to MVS, but with a different skill set. And so you kind of fit him into a different part of the offense. And now what you replace that with is a lot of unknowns. And you never know how that's going to end up in the NFL. Hopefully it ends up in their favor, but it's definitely a risk that they're taking. Nikki M asks, we just got a couple more here. Seth, I've been asking everyone, why aren't games in Europe played in the evening there? They would be on in the afternoon here. There's a 6 or 7 hour difference between Europe and most of us. So this seems to make the most sense to me. I agree. And I can genuinely tell you, I don't know. I think part of it might be because maybe the timing for players, because they've already got a lot of jet lag going over there. I have no idea, though. It would make way more sense to me as opposed to having it in the morning, but maybe it's just another time slot for them to dominate, because you've got to understand every time slot that the NFL can be on is one more, so if your game is at 8 or 8 or 9 in the morning on Sunday morning, there's no other NFL games competing with you. And so now that's more commercial revenue money. And that really is a big part of every decision they make, is how it can raise revenue, because at the end of the day, as much as we romanticize football, and we should, because football is amazing, the NFL itself is a business, and the primary goal is for them to get richer. And so you can trace back most decisions to that, just like any other business. And that's just, unfortunately or fortunately, I mean, I don't know if it's unfortunately or fortunately, it just is. That is how it goes, is that they're going to make those decisions based on that. Lidre Stevens asked, 2 years from now, you are the Chiefs. I think you mean, who are the Chiefs' top 3 wide receivers? 2 years from now, I think the top 3 wide receivers are Tony and, man, I want to say Rice and Moore, but that's like best case scenario. That's what the Chiefs are banking on, right? That they somehow hit on Moore and Rice, and that Moore takes a big step forward in year 2, and that Rice, has a good trajectory, because then they've got a young, cheap wide receiver group that's very physically talented. I think probably the top 3 guys in 2 years, because MVS, if he continues to produce as he has, will probably price himself out just barely with everything else that they're doing. And so I'm going to go. I like MVS, though, honestly. I think he brings more important skill sets to the offense than people realize. So I'm going to go with Tony, Rice, and all I'm doing is betting on the shiny new thing this year, and TBD. J7 says, Casey knows barbecue, but the pizza must be awful. If you think Tombstone is good, LOL, can't have it all, I guess. I respect your ability to be completely wrong about this. All right, I only have a couple more minutes here, and I just did want to talk about one thing that I wrote about this week on the Chief in the North. I wrote about Keondre Coburn, and the reason I want to bring him up, you can go check it out at minnesotachiefsfan.substack.com or bit.ly/SethReallyHatesMoney. The reason I want to talk about him is because he has a specific skill set that I think will get him on the field early and often. And so, like, this right here might not stand out to people all that much in a snap, but it stands out to me because what he's doing here is he's swallowing a double team, and watch his feet and his blockers' feet, and watch how they don't travel, and watch how he keeps both of them engaged long enough for the linebacker back here to pursue and close. And there's no other gap that's presented there because he controls this so well. There's not a huge gap that's presented here, and the linebacker is able to hang out in both gaps without being reached by either one of these blockers. And that's a big part of it. When you hear about this is a nice run stop play here. When you hear about a defensive tackle keeping blockers clean, that's that's snaps like this where you don't get any glory for holding your ground against that combo, but by keeping this blocker from climbing to this linebacker, you allow him to roam free. And Keondre Coburn's film is full of stuff like that. I really, really liked his film. I was surprised he was a 6th-rounder, but, being kind of pigeonholed into more of a run-stopping role, that's going to do that in terms of value. He's a guy whose film review I really think everyone should check out, not just because I wrote it, but because I think you'd enjoy watching him play. He is, the way I phrased it, he is built like a barrel filled with cement, and that's how he plays. Lower body power is such a huge part of what he does. And he actually moves around a little better than you'd expect for a guy his size. That's one thing that kind of differentiates him from Derek Nottie, who's for one thing, he's lighter than Coburn. But it's also that Nottie it doesn't have quite as much agility as Coburn does. So that's going to be an interesting challenge to Nottie, who after a solid rookie year, he hasn't developed a whole lot. And it'll just be interesting to see whether or not there's snaps to be taken there. And so I'd urge everyone to check that out. Make sure to reply in the comments section with whatever mailbag questions you have for next week. I appreciate everyone, as ever, listening to and watching as we kind of go through some of these things. Doing mailbag stuff is one of my favorite parts of this job. I appreciate you all. And once again, it is a great week to be a Chiefs fan. I'll see you guys next week.